I'm Matt Downing, and welcome to Diving Deep EDU.
Curious conversations with all types of peeps. Encouraging innovation, we are diving deep. Certainly education is what we like to speak. Fervent with dedication, now it is time to teach. Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in. We are doing a mini quick hitting series on hybrid learning. It's a hot topic these days and something many people are reflecting upon and gearing up for in the next school year. Our guest today is Dominic Traynor. Dominic was a former guest on Diving Deep EDU. Go back, check out our conversation, episode number 8. Dominic comes to us from across the pond, London, England. He is the son of 2 primary school teachers. And for years, he tried to avoid being teacher like the plague. But in the end, the teaching life won out. Dom is the education evangelist for Adobe, helping teachers to bring learning to life. He is the founder of Lit Film Fest. He is the author of Literacy Beyond the Classroom. Check it out. And he has a great YouTube channel, Digi Dom. Dom, thanks so much for joining me again. You just got married. Congratulations. What's something from the wedding day that made you laugh? And where did you go on your honeymoon?
Oh man, what a day it was. It was lovely. We did it down in Devon, where my mum's from. And I guess something that would make people laugh would be that we got married on the Saturday, and I only told the family on the Wednesday to make sure they had something nice for the Saturday because they didn't know anything about it.
And how did they respond to that?
It was great because my mum's such a worrier. And so she was like, "Oh, I'm really glad you didn't give me any more time to worry." So it worked out really nicely. It was perfect. And then she lives on the coast. And so we just walked along the kind of beach up to a little hotel overlooking the headland. And yeah, it was just really nice. Perfect day. Absolutely amazing weather, especially for the UK.
Well, congratulations, Dom. Excited for you. Glad everything worked out. My mom probably would have punched me in the face if I would have told her the Wednesday before the Saturday.
She'd have had every right to.
But it's great to talk to you again. And just wanted to narrow our conversation today on hybrid learning, right? It's been a big topic and across the world, right? And I know you've done a lot of talking, discussing, thinking about it. And as we reflect even today, right, as we're thinking back, what are some of your big takeaways in respect to hybrid learning?
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge topic, isn't it? And I think what are my big takeaways? I think the biggest one that I took away was that it finally opened the door, or at least forced the door open for a lot of teachers who weren't necessarily particularly comfortable with technology and online learning and stuff like that. And it forced them to see what was behind the curtain. And I think, we would never, ever dream of saying that there were good things about COVID. But if you had to choose one, I think that would be it. The fact that teachers were forced to kind of modify their practice. And in some sense, they were given the slack to be able to do that, because that's often, you can't necessarily see the wood for the trees because things are so busy. But when there's such a huge shift like that, it forces people to do things that they wouldn't normally do. And I think, in a lot of ways, it's really opened up the opportunity for technology to show what it can do, which it hasn't done before. And I think, people talked about, I think one of the things that people were scared about was that technology was going to take over and it would replace people and all the rest of it. And I think this has really been a brilliant way of showing teachers that technology without teachers is nothing. Teachers need to be there. And the other thing, in order to make that learning make sense, in order to craft that learning journey. And the other thing I think is really interesting is that teachers have kind of seen that they don't have to be the expert. One of the things that always used to frustrate me when I was trying to get teachers to use technology was that I think teachers have this this kind of feeling that they need to be the expert at the front of the class in everything they do.
Yeah.
And they don't, because the job of a teacher is a facilitator.
Mm-hmm.
People often use the phrase, the teacher is the first learner. And I think one of the things which has been great is that it's forced teachers to go, hey, I don't really know that much about, using technology for, whatever it is. Like in my case, it would be a lot of media production stuff,
Yeah.
really simple stuff for creating graphics or web pages, presentations, videos, that kind of thing. And what it's allowed them to do is to say, hey, we've got some tutorials here. Why don't we all give these a go as a class together?
Hmm.
Teacher being a learner at the same time as the students or the pupils being learners. And that's really meant that it's kind of taken the edge off the fact that they need, the idea that they need to be the expert at the front of the class, because they can suddenly open their mind and say, hey, there's a tutorial here. I mean, that's a lot of what I do.
Yeah.
Create little tutorials where you can embed them into the classwork, and it's not taking over the class. It's just saying, hey, teacher, you do what you normally do, whether it's, story creation or
Mm-hmm.
fact finding with the kids. Do all the normal traditional work, because that's the start for everything you do, whatever you're producing, if it's digital media. And
Yeah.
then you take that and let me help you with that digital media creation bit. And that can be through a really simple tutorial, which means that you don't have to feel like you have to know it all, and the kids need to see that you know it all. You can put that video on, just a 5 minute, 10 minute snippet, whatever it is, and then let them run with it. And I think that's the best thing that's come out of this.
Yeah, I agree. It can be very freeing, right?
Mm.
To not have to be the expert on on everything.
And it's
But
impossible.
yes, it's
Impossible.
impossible. But teachers seem to be like control freaks a little bit, and they want to control and sort of have their hand in everything, and we sort of have to open our hand up and let go, and sometimes it will become better than what we could imagine. I did want to get your insight a little bit more on something you said. You said that technology has allowed teachers to do things differently than they would have never done. So one of the examples you shared was that they don't have to be the experts. I love that. I
Mhm.
think that can really transform a classroom beyond just the technology aspect. What are some other ways that you have seen people interact with technology differently as a result of this past year?
I think one of the things that's been really good is this, and this is something that I think needs to be adopted, education wide, is
Mm,
the is digital portfolios. I think we have this, long-standing aggressive hangover, of having to record everything in books.
mm,
Certainly in the UK, there's a lot of stuff around, make sure you get something in the books because that's where the evidence is. And actually, what with this kind of hybrid learning situation that we've been forced into, for whatever reason, it's meant that actually, you know, I've worked with a lot of schools where kids are starting to create their own digital portfolio of work. So they might create a video on whatever, something in history, for example. They might create a graphic, like an infographic on, 5 ways to say, how are you in French, whatever it is. They can go through multiple subjects, but
mm.
then they bring it all together in one place, which is their digital portfolio. And rather than it being, because one of the things that used to that's happened quite a lot in the UK is you produce something digitally, and then in order to have it in their books, teachers will try and print something out so they can put it in their books to prove that it happened, which to me is total madness.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really like is that digital portfolios have really been legitimized as a place where here's where you can store work here. And if you want to create a QR code which links through to that
Oh, that's
portfolio and
cool.
stick that in your book, that's fine. Because then when someone is, looking for evidence on whether, little Matthew has made any progress this year, yes, they can look in their book, but they can also, scan a QR code or visit a short code or something like that and say, oh, wow, as well as the stuff that he's done in the book, he took
Mm,
that further and he produced something, a digital version of that, or, expanded on it and took it to a whole nother realm of making a video on it or a web presentation on it or something interactive, whatever it is. And I think that's been really cool.
That's great. Some of our listeners are probably wondering, Dom, do you have any suggestions on a digital portfolio platform? Have there been a couple that you have seen that have worked really well?
I mean, the one that I use the most, and that's because I work at Adobe, is Adobe Spark Page. That's a
Yeah,
really simple
it's
one,
really good.
and we've used that from elementary school right the way through to like higher education. So we'll have
Yeah.
university students who might
Hmm.
be creating things using really sophisticated technology, whether it's like Adobe Animate or Premiere Pro, whatever, but
Yeah.
using something as simple as Spark Page in order
Hmm.
to bring those things together and just have it as a hub where they can link out to different things. So that's one.
Okay.
There is Adobe Portfolio. That's more for sort of secondary school users. That's very simple but very sophisticated. Looks very
Okay.
slick. But then you've got things like Wakelet. Wakelet's
Yep.
really good, and
Yep.
that can take any sort of media you like.
Yes.
You can have it as a class page. You could have a class portfolio,
Right.
for example, or you could have an individual portfolio. They could be linked from there. It can, it doesn't require teacher student signups. The teacher can share a code for
Hmm.
students to access that particular Wakelet collection, for example. So they would be the ones that I kind of would use the most, I guess.
Yeah, and I've used both of those, and I've shared both of those with teachers, and those are also my two favorite.
Mm,
Spark Page and then Wakelet. And Dom, you have, if we get to it in the end, I'll give you, we'll get into your tutorials, but I've been able to share those out with hundreds of teachers, and I really appreciate all the tutorials and the way that you sort of guide us through the learning process. So thanks, and
no, thanks to
much
you. Appreciate
appreciated.
that.
Dom, you've also probably interacted with some people that, this has been hard, right? And there's no way around that. So I did want to address that for a moment. What have you seen as maybe some of the biggest struggles, maybe one or two that educators face when they're trying to deal with this type of teaching?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think um, the transition from things being very pen and paper based,
Mm,
that is obviously just a really, really normal challenge. I guess the other thing that has been kind of interesting is that because you can't have all your students in a room, for example. I think one of the things that people have struggled with is making sure that work is being done.
hmm.
And I think one of the things that that's made people really think about is is the curriculum that they're teaching in school actually engaging enough to be
Sure.
done when you're not in the room with a
Hmm.
big stick making people do it. Do you know what I mean? And I
I like
think
that.
the curriculum has probably got a lot to answer for now. Certainly in the
Mhm.
UK, we're doing a lot of things which I think people are starting to think, is this relevant?
Mm.
Is it relevant to my future? Am I getting the skills I need for my future? And I think that's really making people think, are we, learning at its best is hugely engaging. And when
Yeah.
you're really engaged in learning, you don't notice the time passes.
Hmm.
And I think we have to be honest with ourselves and say, is the curriculum that we're teaching engaging enough for people to do independently? And maybe with check-ins and all the rest of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But that is a really interesting one because I think one of the things that I certainly got feedback from teachers on is that when sort of lockdowns first happened and teachers were attempting to deliver their standard curriculum via Zoom, Google Meets, Microsoft Teams, whatever it is,
Hmm.
I think they were being met with bleeding eyeballs on the other side of the
Yeah.
video screen because without that human interaction and a bit of banter in class, gets you
Hmm.
through a lot of maybe not such exciting times. And I think when you don't have that kind of interaction and everybody's kind of sat in their bedroom or whatever, looking into a screen, you really have to start questioning whether the content we're delivering is engaging enough.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I really appreciate that and sort of encouraging a reflection on the core of curriculum and the engagement piece. That's great. Let's think forward now. Let's envision, the next year or even maybe beyond that. What are some things that you would hope for as we move forward with hybrid learning?
Yeah, so this is really interesting because I'm doing a lot of thinking and sort of writing about this at the moment. And
Hmm.
one of the things I've been really amazed by in the last year or 18 months. I mean, God knows how long this has been now. Just absolutely no idea anymore. Feel like I'm stuck in some kind of
I know.
Groundhog Day. But is the explosion of online courses.
Hmm.
So, I mean, in terms of things you can do online now, you can take an online course to build your own machines and
Yep.
prototype them and develop them and all that kind of thing. And
Hmm.
I'm just like, oh my god, that's incredible. Like, I just wish we'd been able to do that in school. I've
Yeah.
seen courses on learning the art of branding. That is something that for someone who's started a few businesses, some more successful than others. I was miles behind the curve in terms of branding, and I would
Mm.
really love to see that kind of thing, on a new style of curriculum for
Yep.
young people, and also things like, I mean, I saw one course from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and it was power and responsibility from superheroes in comic books,
Oh wow.
and they were teaching this hugely engaging course about what are the ethics and the thoughts behind power and responsibility, using things like Marvel comics, using
Mm.
things like Hollywood films. And I just thought, God,
Yeah.
what an amazing thing to be able to teach somebody. And I think that's one of the things that I would really like to see going forward, is for us to start to say, within our school we have teachers who are experts, and they might be subject experts, they might be subject knowledge experts, and that's fine. But they also might be experts in just teaching. Maybe they're not like hugely solid in terms of content, but maybe they just really know how to get kids going. Maybe
Mm.
they really know how to engage kids. And what I would really like to see is this blend where, rather than the school saying we are limited by the content and subject knowledge that our teachers have, I would love them to say we are completely unlimited in our choice of the kind of course that we can offer, because we have master facilitators, master
Mm.
motivators, master engagers. And so we can choose anything we like, and we can use the sort of like online master of
Yeah.
content or master of subject or whatever it is,
Mm.
and we can blend that with our in-house people, our in-house teachers who know the kids, who know the content, know the context of the kids,
Yep.
know the speed at which they need to learn, know how to motivate them, all of those kind of things, and blend those two things together, because that, in my mind, is how you build a super school.
Mm.
Rather than limit yourself to what subject knowledge you have within the school, which is always going to be limited by humans,
Yeah.
allow that to expand out and say, hey, we've got a huge, like, global sort of menu of content we can take here. Let's harness the power of that from the outside and use our people on the inside to bring that alive for our young people.
Yeah, I like the way that you frame that. Not just those courses by experts, which are wonderful, right? They're popping up everywhere. They're great. But I
Mm,
really like the way that you frame that within the context of a school, and appreciating the way that teachers can facilitate that learning, even if they're not the ones sort of delivering that expert, 15-minute clip, but the teacher can then like sort of help the student understand it, process it, discuss it, move on, and
exactly. And
facilitate that.
also be challenged themselves by the content
Mm,
and be
I
like,
like that.
whoa, what does that mean? Let's explore
Mm.
that together. How, I
Yep,
don't really get this. I don't really
that's
get that.
cool.
And that's what a master facilitator, that's what a master teacher
Yep,
does. They don't
yep,
say, oh, listen, if I don't know it, it's not worth knowing.
yeah,
They say, oh, maybe I don't know that either. Let's
yep,
explore that together. Let's see how that works. And that's
that's
how
great.
if you can learn something and then teach somebody else. I mean, that
Mm.
is a superpower.
Yeah, I wanna go to a school like that, where the teacher's like that,
Me and you both.
Dom, you have some great video tutorials. I wanted to get your insight on something I've been thinking about, and you've mentioned this a little bit earlier. So, you said the UK people are sort of obsessed with paper and having these worksheets, and people are like that across the world as well. So, I wanted to ask you a sort of a two-part question: one dealing with the tutorials that you create, and the other one dealing with that sort of idea. So, how do we get the teacher, or even help ourselves, not just digitize worksheets in an online learning environment? So we're not just taking this worksheet and digitizing it and think, okay, that's sort of using technology in a transformative way. And then the other part of the question I wanted to get your insight on is, you create these wonderful tutorials, and our listeners, you should go check them out on YouTube. And you do such a good job of sort of explaining the tool, but also leading towards student creation. And I wanted to get your insight on that. So that's kind of a lot. Let's start with the digitizing worksheet piece, your thoughts on that, and then we'll move over in sort of your thought process and how you create these tutorials with student creation in mind.
Yeah. Okay. So with the digitizing worksheets thing, if that's as far as it goes,
Mm,
then there's no progression there. We're just
yeah.
using a different tool. We're just replacing the pen with the mouse
Hmm.
or the keyboard or
Yeah.
whatever. So that, but that's not to say that digitized worksheets don't have a place. You know,
Hmm.
digitized documents don't have a place. Of course they
Good.
do. I mean, in a lot of the tutorials that I create, that I will create sort of supporting documents for people to write in and things like that. But I feel like they are there for idea generation. You need somewhere to put your ideas down. And I think if we look at this through the lens of sort of creativity, you know, unbridled creativity can often be like a sort of hot mess. And so, in order to kind of bring that into some kind of coherent structure, we're going to need something like, offline worksheets, online worksheets, whatever that is, Google Docs or whatever.
Hmm.
And that helps us to gather our ideas down. And the framework of a worksheet or whatever is really useful because it gives people boundaries, but it also allows people to see where those boundaries are and overstep those boundaries as well. And so digitized worksheets, or writing frames or idea generation tools, whatever, that's absolutely fine. But they should be there as the kind of the design phase, the idea
Hmm.
generation phase, the
Okay.
drafting phase,
Cool.
and then the next bit is where the creativity comes in, and that can be digital creativity, and it can be physical creativity, it can be you know creativity in the science classroom, whatever that is. But those worksheets are there as a tool to take you on the next level, which is your creation phase. And that's what I'm really always trying
Hmm.
to push, is this idea that yes, you can get ideas down on paper, or digital paper, whatever it is, but that should be leading you to
Yeah.
produce something else. And the sort of domain I work in is the sort of digital media domain, and so
Hmm.
that's where I want them to push it to the next level. How do you take that story or poem that you've written or whatever? How do you make that into some kind of engaging digital narrative? How do you make that into a voiceover poem? How do you make that
Hmm.
into an engaging video narrative? Or like if you were doing something in the science classroom, for example, how would you sort of video document what you did in a science experiment, for example? Show them through the steps,
Yeah.
video the steps that you're doing, or use images in the steps that you're doing, because what that's doing is it's allowing you to create something which takes things from a page, or takes things from a conceptual level and brings it into real life. And the reason why that's important is because
Hmm.
it develops, and the way I think about it, it develops kind of memory hooks. And it's sort of, if you create a short montage, or you present to camera on something, and then you record it on video, voiceover, whatever, that creates a kind of memory hook or an emotional trigger, which allows you to keep hold of these, globules of information, or whatever, bubbles of information that you're wanting to retain on a long term basis. And the more you can do that, the more ways in which you can represent that, visualize that, digitize that, the better you're going to be at actually retaining that knowledge in a long term, over the long term. And that's what we're looking to do. And that's why I think we need to go from this kind of worksheet phase into making into something more creative, something which allows us to, develop, memories, emotions, positive emotions to things, so that we can actually recall them at the time when we need them, which is what learning is all about.
Yeah, and I appreciate that in your tutorials. I can feel that, right? The scaffolding almost that you create. Like, okay, we're going to start here, and this is great, but we need to go here. And a lot of times people can miss that first step, and they say digitizing a worksheet, we're never going to do that. That's terrible, right? But you're
Mm.
saying sort of like, yeah, let's start there, but we want to go somewhere else. And that can be really helpful for the teachers that you're engaging with or the students that you're engaging with, because sometimes if we skip that initial step, we sort of have lost people along the way.
Yeah,
So
for sure. That's the thing. It is so true. You need that sort of stable base, so that you can go and create something weird and wonderful, which floats around in the wind and all the rest of it. And also, one of the really important things is to especially with creating digital media, for example, as a product of something that you're learning in class, it gives you something which is much richer, which allows you to reflect on what you have learned. Have you processed this concept in the right way? Say like it was a scientific concept, and you suddenly create a video on how to, I don't know, I'm not a scientist, but how to do X in the science classroom. If you have some kind of something which goes beyond just regurgitating something on a page, it allows you to explore whether do they actually understand that properly, how have they represented that, and you can share that feedback as a class in a much more engaging way, in a way that people would really want to listen and really want to pick things apart. And I think that's one of the most important things as well that media helps you to do. It allows you to create something which gives you a deeper chance of reflection.
yeah, that's exciting to think about that and to hear you talk about that. All right, Dom, close us out with some tips or final thoughts in regards to hybrid learning.
Biggest tip I would say is to take the pressure off yourself and find a tutorial online from somebody who's done it time and time again and can bring learning to life in your classroom, and get back to doing what you do best, which is having amazing relationships with the learners in your classroom, motivating them, pushing their buttons, pushing them as far as they can go. Try not to be the expert, but be the expert curator. That's the thing that I would say. Be the expert curator rather than the subject knowledge expert. That's subject knowledge is a never-ending, well of despair. You'll never get to the end of stuff. So just give it up. Allow somebody else to take that bit on, and be the person that brings that all together, because that's what makes students remember the best teachers, the person who pulled together the funnest experiences. Be that person.
Dom, thank you so much for joining me again on Diving Deep EDU. This was a fast-paced and super helpful conversation. Thanks for all your insights and the great examples. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget, you need to go back, listen to episode number 8 as well, and hear our previous conversation. If you like this episode, subscribe, share it out, and leave a review. All of those things will
do it.
Thanks for that shout out. And all those things will help get this podcast out. Leave a review. Until next time.
Wow, it's time to reflect. That's astounding. You've been checking out the podcast from Matthew Downing. Hope you like diving deep like a scuba diver. And the show provoked hope. That's our true desire.